Hi, I think I am muted. Let me,
I
there
can
we go.
hear
Hi.
you. Hi. Thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and is it okay if I record this and post it later for members
Yeah,
to
of course. Yeah. Feel
Okay,
free to do that. I'll try to answer your questions as best as I can.
no, that is perfectly okay. We're just excited to have you come talk. We know a lot of people are interested to kind of working at Children's and all, so super just excited to hear you and for you to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it. I see some people are joining.
hmm We'll give people until like 12:05 because a lot of classes just let out at 11:50.
hmm
So we'll give people a few more minutes and then we can get started.
Yeah, no problem.
Me. Review.
There I am. Hi, Maddie. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Look at you.
I know. I remember having your class, so I don't even know what semester that was.
I don't know. It was career planning and it was developmental lab too.
Yeah. Man, time flies. I
I
don't
know.
know how long ago that was.
No, you've been out 1 or 2 years now.
A semester. It was last December. I graduated a little bit later. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Okay.
still.
That sounds right. See, I was on sabbatical in the spring, so I haven't paid much attention to.
Yeah. No,
So
actually, is it a semester? It was last December, so I guess not a semester. I
well,
don't even know.
yeah, you're coming up on a year.
Yeah.
You're coming up on a year, so.
I know. Sometimes I forget. It's all
Yeah.
a blur at this point.
Well, you're gainfully employed, and so that's a good thing.
Yes. Yes, it is, especially during these trying times.
That's right. That's right. Hi, Taylor.
Hello. All right.
Hi, Maddie. I'm Cecile Marchinsky, and I'm the chair of
Hi.
the department. I don't think I've ever had you in class, right?
No.
Okay. Anyways, thank you for speaking today. I really appreciate,
Yeah,
I'm
no problem.
busy, but thank you for
Good to
coming.
see familiar faces.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So, how's the things in the hospital? Is it really busy with COVID and everything?
It's starting to pick up. Yeah, we've been going through stages. I actually started at a very interesting time, like remote. So it was,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I literally, I got the job and then I started and then I was going to start 2 weeks after they gave me the job offer and then they went into quarantine. So I had to meet my supervisor in like a parking lot just to get my laptop and sign like EOAs and a bunch of stuff. And she's like, all right, go home. Good luck. So
Did
yeah,
you
it was
do all your training virtually and everything?
everything.
Wow.
Yes.
That is crazy.
Yeah. So once I actually got to go in the hospital, it was like, okay, so this is what it's like to be here. So yeah, it was very interesting, but I mean, it was also a good experience to, I guess, get to experience something different.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because I think we'll never be the same again. Like the world of work will change and it'll be a permanent change.
Yes. I was watching a show in a hospital the other day and just looking at the doctors and nurses without a mask. And I'm like, that is just, seems so long ago. Cause I'm like, that's never going to happen again. At least not for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting times.
Yeah, definitely.
Maddie, did we have lifespan development together? I'm trying to remember what we had together.
Yeah, we did like, oh, I don't know how long ago. That was like
3 or 4 years ago, probably.
probably like around 4 years ago, because it was
Yeah.
right when I had transferred to NKU.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, long
That's
time
cool.
ago.
Well, I'm glad you're doing well.
Yeah, thank you. Same
Yeah.
to you. I
Yeah.
feel like you think about those classes and it's like, what was that, 2 years ago? 1 year ago? It's like, wait, no, it's like 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy how time flies like that.
Yes.
Do you connect with anybody? I'm trying to think. There was somebody in that class. You guys did your presentation.
Laura Bossy.
Yes.
Yes. She actually started at Children's too as a CRC1, but then she left soon after. I think she's in grad school right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see you that you sat right in front of the
Yeah.
other, and in that 3:30.
Yeah, we tried to connect, but then we were both remote, so it was kind of hard to meet up for lunch. So I'm like, well, but yeah, she was at Children's for a little bit too.
Okay. Okay.
I apologize if my cats are like all over the place. I'm trying to keep them off the desk, but they are relentless.
You know, it's part of the world right now. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it the same cat you brought to class at one time?
Yes, I can actually bring him over. He is almost 18 pounds. He is, yeah. Give me 1 second.
was it show and tell day, Dr. Yates? What's the
No, she showed up to Animal Learning one day and she was like, I have a cat. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. I haven't been trained how to handle animals coming into my classroom.
Yeah.
Whoa!
That's a
Yeah.
big boy.
He is huge.
He's a lot bigger than when I saw him. Like,
I
it was
brought
little
him in a
itty-bitty
beanie.
thing.
I literally brought him inside of my beanie because I had to take him to the vet, and I was like, I either have to miss class or I have to just take him with me. So I just stuffed him in my beanie and I took him to class, and I'm like, I'm sorry about this. But yeah, he's big. I have another cat now too. I'm becoming a crazy cat lady. But you know, it's what it is.
I feel that. So I think this might be all we are going to get today, which is perfectly okay. It's our first Zoom meeting. So go ahead and
All right,
Go
so
ahead.
I'm gonna start. I know we talked about some questions, but feel free to interrupt at any time. I mainly want to focus on people that like didn't have as much time to do like research while they were in college, because I know that's definitely a challenge for people that worked while they were in college. So I kind of want to give them my experience of just being a super busy college student and then trying to land a job like this. I feel like a lot of people feel like if they don't have that experience that it's impossible to get a job in research, or especially at Children's. But I will say the biggest thing that I can tell you is, I mean, going to class and labs, research methods, I mean, all of those things are experience. You just have to know how to apply them. So what helped me land this job was, I mean, taking experiences from like research methods and being able to like explain in the interview what I did, even though it's just a class, and kind of apply that to a real life setting and telling them how those skills would help me at the job, which actually it is very similar. Actually, I can say research methods, it has a lot of similarities with this job, especially learning how to read peer review like papers and protocols and things like that. It was super, super helpful. So I want to tell you, if you didn't get a chance or if you feel like you're falling behind with research experience, you have that experience. You just have to dig back to previous classes, professors, and reach out, and you'll realize that you have a lot more experience than you think. That's not to say that it's not, I'm not saying don't do research while you're in school. Like definitely if you have the time and the opportunity, do it. But some of us didn't have time and had jobs and just had a very full schedule, which is just life. So as far as once you become a CRC, I think getting involved is very important, there's something called the CRP, which is Clinical Research Professionals. They have committees, they have meetings, they have videos, they have all of these things that you can honestly just Google and look up and go to their website and get informed on what they do. And it'll give you a pretty good outlook on like what it is, what's it like to be a CRC. I got hired on as a CRC2. Usually at Children's, to be a CRC2, you need a bachelor's degree. I believe they might hire, I mean, nobody on our team hasn't had any like previous college experience. They've all gotten like their master's and bachelor's. Some even have a PhD, but that's not to say that for high school students, I think you need like 4 years of experience. Obviously, it's not the case here because I'm talking to college students. So, but I just kind of want to let you know what they would be looking for. Now, they also have CRC1 positions. And you got to think, Children's is a huge, and feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions. Children's is a huge organization. So there's oncology research, there's all sorts of research. I am in emergency medicine. So when you think of becoming a CRC, it's not just exclusive to emergency medicine. This is just my experience. The one thing I can say about emergency medicine, it's very exciting. You never know what you're going to go in and see that day. So I'll give you kind of examples of research studies that I work on. One of them, I'd say the most exciting one is Psi Chi, which is a study where we get to go into the trauma bay. We have to like gown up, and every time we have a trauma alert, usually will be like kids that have been in car accidents, things like that. We look for 3 criteria, which is like C-spine, like cervical spine imaging, trauma team alerts, and EMS transports. And you get to go in and see some pretty, I don't want to call it exciting because it's a terrible situation, but I mean, you kind of have to, go in with a mentality that you might see something that might be a little shocking. But you get great exposure. A lot of if you're interested in research and perhaps medical school, we've had so many of our CRCs that go on to become doctors because it's like really, really good exposure to be in there and be in that setting. And we work really closely with doctors. So pretty much doctors are our PIs, which is principal investigators. So you get to work with them closely when you become a lead CRC, which I just did. I'm about to for one study, but I'm about to for 2 more studies. So you get to have meetings with them all the time. And I think it's really important to learn your limits as an individual and communication skills, because you're working with people that are, not only are they doing 12-hour shifts at the hospital, they're also very busy doing research on the side. So you kind of have to, I don't want to say be available 24/7, but definitely be on the lookout, and that means checking emails, taking initiative, because they're not going to hold your hand and, tell you what to do. Sometimes you have to help them out because they are very busy, and you're busy too. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, cool. I'm going to keep going. Oh, okay.
So what do you look for the study? So are you trying to recruit families for the study that you're looking for the trauma and stuff? Are you recruiting families? Are you doing a quality control study? Or are you doing some sort of?
So for C-spine, I'm actually not the lead coordinator for that study, but what I do for that study is we all kind of divide our time with admin days and recruitment days, if that makes sense. So when I'm recruiting, I'm helping out all of the other lead CRCs get enrollments for their studies. So C-spine is just any type of cervical spine injury that we're looking for. We're not recruiting families for that study per se, but we do get provider surveys, EMS surveys, and surgical surveys. So it's kind of crazy because you have to go into the trauma bay, observe the situation, and kind of, they'll bring in a huge machine, get x-rays, and you have to kind of like do a checklist in your head, like, okay, they got cervical spine imaging, they got this, they got that, they're eligible. And you stand, kind of watch what's going on, try to catch the doctor, and they will do a survey. I will say most of the doctors in the emergency department are super helpful with research. So they're always down to help out, down to do the surveys. and we always report any sort of issue back to our lead CRC. But yeah, that study, I believe the only interaction they have with families is if they don't get cervical spine imaging, and then we hand off a cover letter. So yeah, you get to really see all aspects of research, if that makes sense. Like C-spine, it's not something I really get to dive into. I do some admin work. I help out the lead CRC with like x-ray reviews, missed eligible patients, so we can kind of get some numbers. But you get to kind of work on the surface with the recruitment, which is knowing inclusion, exclusion criteria, any potential issues, missed eligibles. And then there's other studies when you get to be the lead CRC and you get to really dive in and like do feasibility meetings, help draft up a protocol, read the protocol, know it like from beginning to end. And so there's really a lot of aspects to this, which makes it an exciting job if you don't want to do the same thing every single day. But yeah, so we have right now the studies we're doing is C-spine, which is a cervical spine injury study. We also have PRAM, which is pretty much when kids come in through EMS transport, we have to make sure if they got a breathing treatment. That study has kind of been on hold with COVID. We also have OPEN, which is a penicillin study. So it's pretty much trying to declassify people that have penicillin allergies because penicillin is much cheaper and much more effective than other second or third class drugs. But people, if they ever had one single event, say 7 years ago, they got a rash when they were given penicillin, that doesn't really mean that they're allergic. It might have just been a one-time thing. So our job is trying to convince them like, hey, let's do a screener, see where you're at in the risk scale. And then if you're kind of low, would you be okay with giving us very small dose and just kind of watch your, so yeah, I mean, you get to do some things that are like, okay, we'll see what happens. But obviously everything is like monitored. You have nurses and doctors all around you, but there's a lot of different studies. Going into it, I think it was kind of intimidating for me, thinking of, first off, doing everything remotely and doing all these study trainings with my peers, and then just thinking, oh my gosh, there's so many studies. How am I going to keep track of this in my head when I'm in the ED? And that was my biggest fear. But honestly, once you get kind of in the habit of things, if anybody has ever worked in the hospital setting, we use something called EPIC, where we look at the track board and patient charts. You kind of learn, and it almost becomes a second nature to look at a chart or get a trauma alert and go over and just kind of like automatically think, okay, this patient's not a C-spine, they're probably a PRAM, they're probably this. So it really does, you kind of really get to dive into that inclusion, exclusion, and kind of, it becomes a second nature. I don't know how other ways to explain it. It really does. Which I feel like in school it kind of happens too when you're reading your papers and stuff.
Perfect. Thanks, Maddie.
Yeah, no problem. Does anybody have any other questions? Yeah.
So just in general, how did you like find this position, decide you want to do this position? Because I know a lot of people are interested in it, but I don't think we know how to look for it.
LinkedIn. I searched everywhere, but LinkedIn was a huge resource for me. That's where I found a lot of the postings, and I applied and I got an interview. I was super lucky to get an interview at the time I did, right before we started quarantine. But I will say, very important to put in a cover letter explaining how your experience, because I mean, anybody can just submit their resume and just call it a day and be like, okay, we'll see what happens. But I think and I get to actually interview people that want to apply and be part of our team. All of us do, which is really a nice thing. You know, they let us do that so we can kind of see if we're a good fit and, you know, all of that. And the main thing we look for is, I'm not saying you had to have had the most extensive research experience, because I certainly didn't, but just being able to take whatever experience you do have and apply it to the job and understanding how you would do that. So I'd say on paper, as soon as you're applying, the best way you can do that is a cover letter, and obviously your resume, beef it up. And I mean, you're your biggest advocate. Nobody else is going to really do that. Aside from your references, that's really important too. But yeah, that's honestly how I got the job. I applied on LinkedIn and I got an interview, and here I am.
Thank you.
All right, so any other questions? Okay, so I'm gonna dive into more of like the admin side of things. I think you guys kind of get that. When you're in the ED, you get to recruit and screen for all of these different studies. You also get, now with COVID, it's kind of been a pain because we've had to adjust our protocols and our way of doing things to get like e-signatures and all of these things. And you have to submit every single change to the IRB. So we have to wait for that and their approval. So it's been an experience trying to do all that and put things on hold, but that's also been good because we've kind of learned that now that we've had to adapt, we've learned that, okay, you know what, like maybe all the man hours that we're putting in the ED, we didn't realize that this study could be entirely remote. And it was kind of cool to learn that. We actually stopped like life screening for a few studies like Q-Care. Q-Care is a study. Mainly we want to learn about like the mental strain that taking care of a sick child has on a parent, but we're mainly looking for upper respiratory infections and how that affects the parent while they're caring for kids. And you also got to think at Children's, we have a lot of sick kids that come in with like chronic respiratory illnesses and all of that. So with COVID, obviously, it was a huge fear for us to be going in and out of these rooms with kids that were potentially COVID positive or pneumonia and all of these things that they were kind of all in the same category at that point in time, and we didn't know much about it. So we learned to, at first we were live screening from home and then kind of doing some cold calls, and then we realized we really don't need someone to actively screen patients. We started pulling Epic reports. So that was my very first kind of experience that I had, that I was kind of like given a chance to prove myself, was coming up with the workflow. This will be, I don't want to say expected of you, but definitely you have to take initiative at times when there's an issue, or especially during COVID, we face many issues. It's trying to figure out what is a more efficient way to do this. So my very first workflow was when I was remote and trying to figure out how do I pull a daily report of these patients from 4 sites, because we have the Liberty campus of Children's, we have the urgent care emergency department, and then we have Maine urgent care and emergency department. And I try to figure out how can we do this without live screening and taking up so much time that we can just go in the next day and pull a report and say, okay, there's 100 people, and just go ahead and do the patient charts, review, and call it a day. And that's that. So that was my very first thing that I got to do, which was really cool. And you get to train your peers on it, and you kind of get recognized for that. Meetings. Makes sense before you submit it to the IRB. So it's kind of like saying, okay, well, I don't know, I'm trying to think. Say there's a study and there's not full documented consent. And you want to think, okay, well, if we're doing a drug study, then you probably want full documented consent. And just kind of things like that. It's just throwing out ideas and trying to figure out the ins and outs of it. We do a lot of that. And then, of course, PI meetings, which is with the doctor, kind of giving them a report of how you're doing. Right now, I just took over a study that's called PERN. I'm the sole enroller for that study, and it's got 2 arms. It's got a pneumonia and a COVID arm. So you can imagine initially they told us, you're going to screen and get 5 enrollments per day, which was a very high number, if you really think about it, of either negative or let's set up a meeting when you get a chance. So being a CRC is taking a lot of things into your own hands and taking the initiative because you are working with people that are super busy. And then, like I mentioned, creating workflows and definitely replying to emails. That's a huge one. You have to, if you're having trouble with that in college, you definitely need to think about that one, because that's a huge thing. I remember my freshman year like being awful at it, and then realizing, so that assignment got moved up. I didn't know that. And it's like, well, check your email. So definitely always check your email. Super important. But does anybody want to know anything else?
Maddie, how often do you meet with your PIs? Is it scheduled like every week?
Yes. So I can't really talk much about the study yet because I've yet to do full-on onboarding for it, but I did find out that I'm going to have every single Monday meetings that are going to be 2 to 3 hours long. So that'll be fun. And it's not just with the PI. We also, some of our studies, we are the lead site, Cincinnati Children's, and then other studies, we have like a sepsis study coming up, and you're working with sites in Seattle, you're working with like Harvard, you're working with Stanford. I mean, they're like huge studies. Some of them are even, I think we have a hospital in Spain. So it's honestly, it's not just your PI, it's everybody. You have like just all of the sites coming together and reporting numbers and problems and trying to figure out like, what are you guys doing that we're not doing, and vice versa. And it's just bouncing ideas back and forth. So it's cool, but yeah, it's a lot.
Do you report directly to the PIs, or are there other people kind of in between?
Usually when you are the lead for a study, your PI is the main person. We do have our supervisor who is awesome. I guess any main issues that you might have, she's always a good middleman to have, but mainly your PI is super important. You always have to keep an open line of communication with them.
Great.
Because I mean, it's their study, it's their baby, but they're trusting you to kind of take over a lot of the admin work, a lot of the recruiting, and kind of like, you're in the back kind of making the whole thing happen. And they're kind of like, where are my numbers? Like, what's going on? So yeah, it's super, super important.
So is it pretty intimidating working with those people?
They're all awesome, I can honestly say, but sometimes, yeah, I mean, they're doctors, so they're super high energy people that are used to working like 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. and it's nothing to them. So then you get an email at 3 a.m. and it's like, oh, okay. And it's just, it is what it is. So I will say going into it, I mean, there's definitely a factor that's kind of intimidating, but once you dive in, it's like, they're just people, they're just trying to make their studies happen. And some of them like work really hard for these grants, and they just want to make a change and learn something and being able to help, kids in the future. I mean, ultimately that's our goal. Like we have long bone like fracture studies where we kind of like study the pain management of children and the care we give them in the ED so they can manage that at home better. So I mean, honestly, we're just trying to help people. So it's just, I wouldn't say it's like there's no pressure at all. It's the easiest thing to do, but I mean, it's fun, and if it's something you're interested in, it's definitely a great job to have.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Maddie, I have a question for you related to, so you have experience as a student at NKU, and now you're out in the real world, and you talk about email being such an important mode of communication in the workplace. But as a student, you didn't necessarily check your email in a reliable
and later.
But yeah, you learn. Developmentally, you learn. Yeah. So we as faculty often talk about this, that how can we get students to choose email and pay more attention to it, during undergrad, not only for helping their success in their academics, but modeling for the real world that they're going to need that eventually. So do you have any advice for us in terms of emphasizing the importance, or how we might get students to get used to email?
Right. And I feel like maybe the biggest curve might be for freshmen. I mean, I don't have numbers on this, so I can't say for sure. At least that was my experience. But I guess just stressing the thought, like telling them like, hey, this is going to be a very real thing when you graduate. Like, you know, missing an assignment, and if you have a professor that's like feels bad enough for you, maybe there's something that can be done, but missing a deadline when you have 16 other sites counting on you worldwide, or your PI, and not only are you making yourself look bad, you're making them look bad. I mean, it's a big thing, and it can cost you your job. So I guess just stressing that, you know, I'm not just trying to annoy you, but it's just like, honestly, this is just the real world. I mean, it is what it is. So it's super, super important to like keep that in mind. I wish I could give you a better tip, but I mean, at least that's what it was for me, like realizing like, hey, this is just real life. You gotta.
Well, you're good, and we got you on video saying it, so we're all going to use that in our classes. Be like, listen to this.
It is a huge thing. Sometimes I think back to like being a freshman, and I'm like, man, what an idiot. Like, I'm just like, I could have aced that class and I just checked my email. It's like, it's a huge thing. And even communicating with professors, like, you know, just, I feel like maybe a lot of people might not take advantage of that. That's another thing, like resources. If I could go back, I would love to have more communication with my professors, whether I was doing research for them or not. Just like, there's a lot of things that you're about to go through that they have been through, and they're there to help you. So definitely reaching out via email if you want, or in person, and just, you know, meeting with them. I definitely got to do that with some of the professors, maybe not all of you, but it's a great thing to have. And just getting tips of, hey, how can I make my resume, you know, like how can I put what I've done with you, say if they did research for you, how can I put that into words, and how can I, this is the job I want to get, it's the CRC position in emergency medicine, how can I apply that? How can I mean, even I remember Dr. Barjay taking a class with you and doing brain staining. I mean, people might not think that that's much, but I'm like it or not, that's experience. I mean, you know how to slice up a brain, you know how to stain it, and it's like, I mean, it might not be like directly related to being a CRC, but that is experience. And I feel like I've heard a lot of people talk about, well, I had to work while I was in school. I didn't get the time to do research. I wasn't fortunate enough. And I'm like, well, you got your degree, didn't you? And oh, yeah. Well, then you got to go to class. Did you take a normal psych? Did you take labs? Did you take research method? All of these classes. Well, yeah, that's experience. I mean, you just have to learn how to apply it. Unless you didn't go to class and didn't show up, then, I mean, I can't help you there. But, I mean, it's all experience, being able to take, and that's what I've done, honestly, is taking little snippets of, like, classes that I took, labs, things I learned, and just being able to apply it. SPSS, I mean, things like that. I've literally pulled out my book and looked at it. I still have it, and just said, oh, okay, I know how to do this. And it's just trying to take everything you've learned. That's what college is about. It's experiences. It's everything. Whether you got to do research outside of class, whether you got to do internships, I mean, it's all an experience. And I feel like if you normalize that idea, people might be a lot more confident about going out there and getting a job like this and applying to all these jobs and saying, hey, you know, I have experience, you know, I did this. So I think that's really important.
Maddie, can you talk a little bit more about the application process? Like, when you first saw the job ad on LinkedIn, and then you actually started your first day of work, what happened in between? Like, what was involved in actually getting the job? How much time went by? I'm sure students would be interested in that.
Yes, which I'd like to, it's probably a lot more different now with COVID and how everything has changed. So I got to interview in person, which I can honestly say I'm lucky that I got to do that. But so pretty much I applied, and then I'd like to say, I'm trying to think back, about maybe 2 weeks after I got an email back, called in for an interview, got to go to my very first interview, and I met with the supervisor, and I'd like to say maybe about 2 or 3 CRCs. And it was pretty much, I feel like an interview can either be really stressful or really relaxed, but it's up to you to make it what you want to be. So I kind of went in with, you know, definitely dress professional. And if you're doing a video interview, business at the top. If you want party at the bottom, that's fine. Just don't stand up. Because I know that's the reality now. But Yeah, so pretty much going in and talking about your experience, you know, I talked about how I transferred to NKU, classes I took, and they asked about research experience, and the first thing I said was I took a research methods class, and I got to kind of, I mean, it was kind of a disaster. It was my very first try, and I did it with one of my peers at NKU, drafting up a, you know, kind of like this survey and a Likert scale, and realized that, hey, people are just drawing smiley faces on them and weren't actually answering them. So we had to regroup. And I told them all that. I'm like, it was a learning experience. And they laughed and they said, yeah, we experience that here because you put forth, you know, surveys that sometimes we send out to people and you get the same thing, you know. So it's kind of good that you know the frustratings, you know, in and out of what it's like to just work with people in general. That's just, you know, it is what it is. But I talked a lot about my classes, and the CRCs kind of asked me things like about emergency medicine, like, hey, are you okay with seeing blood? I mean, at first I'm like, weird question, but I mean, now I get it because I've seen some pretty shocking things. And that's not to say that it's going to be like that for everybody. You can go in as a CRC in oncology or psychiatry or just all of these different departments. So I had my first interview, it went great. And then I'd say, honestly, about an hour later, I got an email back asking me to come in for a second interview. And that was scheduled about a week after. Now, the day before the interview, I got really ill. I was like, just not feeling good. I felt awful because I'm like, oh no, this is not going to look good. Thankfully, my manager now, who is the one that interviewed me, she's like, do not be a hero, stay home. I don't want whatever it is you have. So we had to reschedule. And once I went in for my second interview, it was not with my supervisor. It was just with peers, just to kind of get the final, you know, decision. What does everybody think about me? And yeah, it was very relaxed. I was just asking about like, how would you handle this situation? Sometimes you got to think. I think in any hospital setting, and especially children's with very sick kids that come in and out, it's not the family's best day, and they're not there for pleasure. So sometimes, you know, you have to not take things personal, but that's with every job. You can work at a pizza parlor and someone cusses you out and they just had a bad day because they got a flat tire. I mean, that's just life. So just being able to like handle situations. And we talked about that. It went great. And then soon after, I'd say probably about 4 to 5 days, maybe. I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was about that. I'd say a week to be safe. I got a call from HR asking me, you know, about compensation and benefits and all of that, and if I'd like to take the job. I know for CRCs, at least in our department, they're looking for a minimum of a 2-year commitment. I know a lot of students probably have plans to go on to grad school, but the reason why is because you don't really get to, I mean, I've been there 7 months, around 7 months now. And just now I'm getting to really dive in and be like, you know, take the lead on studies and do all these things. So you don't really get to grow as a CRC till about like 6 months to a year in. I think the reason I've gotten to, you know, dive in a lot quicker is because we have been short staffed because we had some of our CRCs go on to med school. But yeah, that was pretty much it. It was very stress-free. And then of course, we went into quarantine and I had to pick up my laptop in a parking lot and go home. But I don't know what the process is like now. I know we're doing electronic, kind of like Zoom interviews. But yeah, that was pretty much it. I don't know if that kind of answered your question. I might have extended it, made it longer than it had to be, but.
So you did say that they require a 2-year commitment. Would you say this is a position you could do while balancing some sort of grad school, or is this like a commitment?
So we do actually have some of our CRCs that were getting their masters, and definitely think, I mean, I can't speak for other people. There's people that are definitely very motivated and don't need much sleep. But there's a lot of demands for this job. I personally could not do that. I feel like it's either this or grad school for me personally, just because, you know, setting up meetings, going into ED shifts. Now, since I am in emergency medicine, we do have a rotating schedule. So sometimes I'm in the ED about 2 to 3 times a week, but sometimes I can be in there 8 to 4 p.m. and then the next day 4 to 12 a.m. because the emergency department doesn't sleep. I mean, it's always open, and we get to catch a lot more patients at night, and our numbers go up. So yeah, at least in emergency medicine, I would not recommend that. But if you do plan on going on to grad school, and you want, say you graduate and you're like, all right, I'm done with school for a little bit, like I need a breather, this is definitely a great job to have for the experience, especially because I know a lot of grad schools kind of want you to have some clinical, like patient care experience, and this definitely counts as that. I know a lot of our CRCs have taken advantage of this job for that same reason. So yeah, definitely recommend that if you want kind of like an interim before you go on to grad school. Anybody have any other questions? Okay, so I think those were, unless I'm missing something, Taylor, were those all the questions you wanted me to hit?
Yeah, that sounds great. That was perfect.
Awesome.
Maddie, I have a real quick question. This is Allison Graff speaking.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. So I didn't have an opportunity to have you in class because I think I missed the window in which you were here, but it sounds like you have some really great personality characteristics that lend itself to this particular position. Like you came here, you got the knowledge, but also that ability to sort of be adaptable and to be outgoing in patient interactions. That's something that I'm not sure all students have. Like they may enjoy the behind the scenes type of research, you know, on data cleaning and things like that. So do you have any advice for students in terms of like putting themselves out there or getting more comfortable with face-to-face recruitment? I do some recruitment things, and it definitely, there are some students who are more drawn to it than others. And so
Right.
advice?
I would say people are just people, so no need to be intimidated. And I know like a lot of people like children, so if that's something that motivates you of recruiting kids, and sometimes you have to get a scent and you have to kind of interact with them. I personally am not the best interacting with children because I don't know how to talk to them. Sometimes I forget what was I like when I was 10 years old, and sometimes I talk to them like they're 60, or other times I talk to them like they're 2. But I think just remembering that they're just humans, and honestly, they're probably not there because they want to, like I said, for pleasure. But if you can go into a room, even though you're recruiting for study, and make their day a little bit better and make a little conversation and say they broke an arm, and tell them, hey, you know, it's going to be okay. I broke my arm too. And, you know, just kind of talk them through it. A lot of times we've actually gotten surveys back of patients reporting on their experience being better due to research staff. And you wouldn't really think of that because you just think of research staff kind of just going in and out and, you know, getting what I need and kind of being introverts. But a lot of them, thankfully in our team, a lot of them have kind of learned to just, you know, enjoy that patient interaction and that experience and talk to them. And it is nice, especially being in quarantine for so long. I felt like forever, and being able to like see people in person, even if it's with a mask and goggles. It's very nice. And I feel like maybe perhaps a lot of students that have kind of been home for a long time and might get to do that, they might appreciate in-person experiences a little bit more. But just remember, I mean, they're just people, and all they want is to feel better, to feel comfortable, less intimidated, and it's probably not their best day. So if you can make it better in any way, that's a point on your end.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I don't know if that answered the question, but that's kind of my outlook on it.
Me again. What are some of the benefits of children as an employer? So, you know, this is another thing that sometimes you think about salary. Obviously, compensation is a big factor in selecting employment, but oftentimes maybe the salary is not as high as somewhere else, but there could be some additional benefits in terms of retirement, healthcare, tuition costs, those sorts of things that make it a pretty attractive thing. So just, you know, what are some of those packages? just out of curiosity.
Yeah, they do have great medical benefits. I mean, they're outstanding, honestly. Which I was very lucky to, get my first job, and this is, what I get first time around. We don't have a 401k because it is a nonprofit. So we have something that's called 403b, but it's essentially the same thing. You get medical, dental, vision, and outside of just like retirement and medical benefits, you do get, like, I don't know if, I think I mentioned that at the beginning, CRP, the clinical research professionals. You get a lot of opportunities from Children's. We actually have a site on our Centerlink page to join in and become part of like their committees, get certified. I mean, there's a lot of things that you get as a Children's employee. And this might not be maybe what you're asking for, but they sent me like a little voucher for a pizza and graders the other day. So that was pretty sweet too. So definitely a good thing to be a Children's employee. But as far as benefits, I mean, yeah, there's always going to be somewhere that's going to pay you more and all of this, but I don't think you can beat a great supervisor that cares about you and wants to help you move forward. And there's definitely a lot of advancement opportunity too. And then just knowing that you have good benefits, and a great organization to work for, honestly. I have no complaints. I am really happy to be at Children's. And believe it or not, their cafeteria food is pretty good. So if you're interested in that.
So if there is not any more questions, I don't know, virtual round of applause for Maddie. That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today.
No problem.
Yes,
Happy to do that.
Yes.
Graf, how are you guys doing that with the little hands, Sarah and Dr. Graf?
There's a reactions bottom right.
Oh.
Oh, sure enough. See, and I learned something extra, there you go.
Oh, I guess that's like me raising my hand. I don't know how to do. Oh, there's the clap. What?
There you
Okay.
go.
I don't know. Okay.
I think raise your hand is a separate thing.
Okay. All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's definitely nice to see some familiar faces again. And I wish you all the best of luck. You have my email, Taylor. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need any help or any tips or anything in the future.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I know how intimidating
Thanks,
it is
Maddie.
because I definitely felt that. I'm like, what am I going to do with it?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that hill looks too close to home. All right. Thank you.
You got this.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Stay
Bye.
safe.